I'm Jeremy Park. I'm the CEO of cityCURRENT. The Get On Board series is a quarterly series that we're expanding this year, so a little bit of a teaser for you. But this is a quarterly series where all of this content comes from you. So when you look at challenges, opportunities that you're facing, all the time, people like you are emailing saying, hey, here's a challenge, here's an opportunity. Could we focus on this? So for all of you tuning in, tell us some of the challenges, some of the opportunities that you're looking at, and we'll see if we can put together a Get On Board series session focused on that very topic. But this one is focused on fostering innovation to maximize impact. We're honored to have Katie Spencer, the founder of Joy of Leading, with us. Thank you again to the Assisi Foundation of Memphis, Inc., which is a longtime partner and collaborator in these events. And so we're honored to have them team up with us to present these to you. But let's go ahead and get rolling. So Katie Spencer, she's the founder of Joy of Leading. As I mentioned earlier, she's been a longtime presenter with this series. She was with Meg Crosby and PeopleCap here in Memphis for a long time. She's relocated to Chicago and started a nonprofit focus called Joy of Leading. She still works heavily with Meg and PeopleCap, so they still have a great partnership. But it's going to be really cool to have her go out on this venture specifically focused on helping nonprofits. And so this is your first glimpse at Joy of Leading. And so when you look at Joy of Leading and the focus for nonprofits, it's for all of you. So Katie, let's go ahead and welcome Katie Spencer. Let's give her a big round of applause. And let's dive into this world of fostering innovation to maximize impact. So Katie, take it away.
Oh, Jeremy, thank you so much. Love the round of applause. That was lovely. And I am just so ecstatic to be here. I love cityCURRENT. We have partnered for a number of years, as Jeremy said, to deliver great content to the nonprofit community in Memphis. And now we're getting to reach all the way out to Denver, a former home place of mine, and other places through Facebook. So I'm thrilled about this expanded reach. I am really pleased to be invited back to share some thoughts and ideas with all of you. And I'm grateful to Assisi Foundation for hosting and supporting this platform for nonprofits. I think it's vital, and thank you for their long-term commitment to this incredible series, Get On Board series. So today we are going to talk about innovation in the nonprofit sector and how you kind of incorporate innovation into your organization's culture or DNA. And before we do that, I would like to just ask you all to do one quick thing. So in the chat space, put what you would rate your organization or would have rated your organization 14 months ago. So just over a year ago in innovation on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being we are blowing it out of the water. So 1 being, we're not really innovative. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where were you 14 months ago? And then put a slash, and where are you today? So have you seen any evolution in your innovation in the last 14 months? So I would rate myself a 2 14 months ago slash a 6 today. Give us some ratings in the chat room. Dottie is saying she was a 6, now she's an 8. So there's been some growth there, which is fantastic. Ernestine was at a 4. Ernestine, has there been any movement in the last year for your organization around innovation? All right. Well, I know 4 out of 6, Ernestine, 4 to a 6, Ernestine says. Fantastic. I think we're going to talk today about what I have seen in some growth and innovation in the nonprofit sector, and still some work to do for sure, and how you can dig into that work. Sharonda says they were at a 3, now they're at a 5. And Pamela is saying she would have rated the organization a 3, and today they're a 7. April went from a 4 to a 6. We're going to talk nonprofit innovation and how you can keep up any momentum you have built, or build some momentum if you're still working on that. So fostering innovation is really about driving more impact. So we exist in the nonprofit sector to impact the communities, the people we serve. We exist to transform issues into successes. So we're here to make impact innovation is a key driving tool to maximize that impact. Why innovate? Well, if you had asked me 14 months ago, I was really, really concerned about the relevance of the nonprofit sector. I was concerned that we were losing relevance in this sector, that we were not keeping pace with the changing world around us. We were not innovating and adopting new ways in response to the changes in the world around us in a way that was keeping up with need and with the innovation globally around us. Bridgespan did a study in 2017 where they found that 80% of the organizations they surveyed believed that innovation was not just important, but that it was an urgent priority. At the same time, only 40% of those who believed it was an urgent priority felt positioned to innovate at all or effectively. We were losing traction in terms of the ways we worked and how we adopted new ways to be more responsive and to maximize more impact. And that was 2017. And I had been really concerned about this for a number of years, as I mentioned, that we were working harder and harder in the nonprofit sector. Employees, leaders were burning out at a faster pace. We were racing and racing, busier and busier, without returning impact for our investment of money, time, and energy. So we were working harder and not seeing the results of that harder work. And yet then this crisis hit. And while it has been devastating, while everyone has been extraordinarily challenged by this crisis, it's created an inflection point for us. We have been given an opportunity to reinvent ourselves. The crisis forced us to reinvent ourselves in many, many ways. We had to do things differently out of necessity. And now, 12 months into the crisis, we're given an opportunity, an inflection point to reinvent ourselves with intention, to innovate with intention, to drive more impact, transform the world. I think sometimes part of the problem is that we think innovation is a bigger thing than it really is. We feel like innovation is the need to become the next Albert Einstein, to invent something earth-shattering. But the reality is that innovation, and this is Bridgespan's definition, innovation is small changes, sometimes big changes, but tweaks that make real impact. So sometimes small adjustments actually drive the biggest results. And that's innovation. It's about continually tweaking to improve. It's about leveraging your creativity to really solve problems, to make changes that show a shift. It's about iterating. So what I love about the concept of iteration is, first of all, it's a never-ending process. You can continually iterate. Also, iteration assumes that it's not perfectly right straight out of the box, that you're putting something out in the world, you're developing a program, you're devising a solution under the assumption that you will need to tweak it as you learn more, that you will adjust it to make it work more effectively or to drive more impact as you go along. That, again, it's not going to be perfect right off the bat. I love that idea. I feel like it's liberating, it's freeing. It allows us to not stress about perfection and instead focus on improvement, continual improvement. If you haven't heard of the book Lean Impact, it is a dense read, but I highly recommend taking a peek at it, and certainly browsing it at a minimum. But Anne Mae Chang wrote a great book on innovation in the nonprofit sector. And the most profound concept for me out of her great book is the idea that we actually need to be more in love with the problem, our mission, what our organization is here to solve for, than our solution. I think that it is really true. In fact, I'm confident it's really true that we frequently get focused on the program we created that we love, or we get really, really focused on the solution we've developed. Sometimes we get focused on the fact that we know and we're the ones to solve this problem more than the problem itself, and are our solutions, are the things we're implementing really moving the needle on that problem? Are we actually creating impact? Because the reality was, and I'm going to be pretty candid with you all, the reality was, from what I was seeing as a consultant, a long-term nonprofit professional, and then for the past 7 years, a consultant in the nonprofit realm, was that really we weren't maximizing impact to the degree that we hoped, aspired to, and sometimes even claimed. That we were working harder and harder, spending time, spending money, spending our energy without really getting a return on that investment that was substantial. We'd become complacent and really started to accept incremental impact or even flat impact. We were putting band-aids on solutions instead of taking the time and making the financial investments to solve for the things that we were struggling with. We had workarounds for our workarounds, and we were spending so much energy and wasting so much time on readhering band-aids rather than actually fixing the problem. And the nonprofit sector has for a long time been mired in a culture of scarcity that has really put blinders on us. We have not been leveraging our mental capacity, our creative capacity to solve problems out of fear that we don't have the resources, we don't have the financial capacity, we don't have the human capacity to either test things, to possibly have things not work out or fail, or to try big, bold steps that might change us from a flat impact to more of a significant trajectory on our impact. We've allowed a scarcity mindset to limit our problem solving and our investment in innovation or change that would drive more impact. Then came 2020. And what I realized was a number of things. But first and foremost, that my concern about the relevance of the nonprofit sector was real, and that my passion for the nonprofit sector was well-founded, that we need the nonprofit world. We need nonprofits in times of crisis more than anything else. Nonprofits are the organizations and the human beings who run towards the crisis. You are the folks donning masks early on to get in lines when everybody else was at home isolating. You were in food lines giving out food. You were serving people in any way you possibly could. You were unafraid, you were committed to the problem, and you were running towards the problem, bringing any solution you possibly could. And at the same time, you were innovating, continually innovating, The opera started singing, popping up in neighborhoods and bringing incredible relief to communities, just some joy in a time of real fear and anxiety. The ballet started delivering the ballet virtually for free. Zoos across the country started bringing children on keeper host chats behind the scenes at the zoo and hosting virtual birthday parties from zoo animals. Meals on Wheels found new ways to safely distribute and serve a much higher demand and need. They've served more people, and they've done it by shifting their schedules, shifting their routes and the way that they deliver and the types of food they deliver, so that in fewer safe visits, a senior still gets a week worth of meals. Boys and Girls Clubs, Wise, across this country became virtual learning sites. Our outdoor spaces, our parks started bringing us the Zen. We realized how essential they were, and we started upping our utilization of our parks and shared outdoor spaces. And they found creative ways to bring our Zen indoors when we needed it to, bring it into our homes, and to remind us of the value of their organizations when we needed them the most. I was blown away by the innovation in this last year. And when the call came, you all responded, but you also got creative and solved problems. So now we have again this inflection point. The professor Scott Galloway, he's a professor at NYU Business School, he wrote a book called Post Corona. And he talks about how between March and August of last year, in the for-profit sector, in the public company sector, how a number of companies grew 10 years or expanded their growth and jumped 10 years in advance of where they had been. They were already positioned on important trends like online retail or very technology enabled companies or social media, et cetera. They advanced their business growth as well as their innovation, in his estimation, 10 years in just a handful of months. I believe in this last year, the nonprofit world also made a huge leap. You all made a leap 10 years forward as well. We may have started a few years or decades behind, but we made substantial and very important leaps in relevance and innovation and in serving with greater impact. Now the goal is to harness that momentum and keep it going. And I know you're all exhausted. So when I say harness that momentum and keep it going, you may think, oh my gosh, what more does she think I have in me? But the reality is that you're already there. So it's a matter of putting simple things in place to keep fueling the innovation you've already created. If you went from that 2 to a 4 or that 4 to a 6, you already have started implementing innovation into your organization's DNA. And now it's just a matter of being intentional about it and nurturing it. Innovation requires some things of us. It does require that we let go of our ego. And I think we don't really talk about ego enough in the nonprofit world. We think we're all givers. We're all very altruistic by nature. That's how we got here. The reality is, though, that there is a lot of ego in our sector in terms of, I know how to solve this problem, or my attachment to this program that I built or this organization that I run, and our unwillingness sometimes to let go of things that don't work or really shine a light on them when they don't work, to change things, to maybe partner with folks sometimes. And yet this year, the crisis demanded that we do that, that we put aside our egos, that we partner creatively, that we let go of the things that weren't going to get the job done and focus on what really works, and shift things that maybe work, but needed to work in a different way to respond to the crisis. And so we did put aside our egos. I think we need to keep checking that as we emerge from the crisis and make sure our ego doesn't reemerge telling us that we know the solution, or telling us that our programs really work and don't necessarily need to shine a light on them really candidly. We need to be honest and brave. You've been so brave for this whole last year. And keeping that up in a new way by really assessing ourselves, our organizations, our programs, and our activities, and being very candid with ourselves about, again, what is working and what is really not returning on all of the effort, the time, and the money we're putting into it. What is not driving the impact it could be based on how many resources we're funneling into it. That we can no longer tolerate. To be innovative, we can't tolerate little bitty change or flatline change. If we want to be innovative, we have to aspire to something bigger. Our innovation is leading us, it's drawn to a shiny aspiration. So we need to think big and not accept little incremental shifts in impact. And we've really got to keep our ears on the ground. I know I have witnessed this and I've suffered this myself. You get more and more into the work of your nonprofit and sometimes realize you're really removed from those you serve or the community that you work in because you're so busy and you're so focused on doing the work. But research shows that the people impacted by your organization actually know what works and what isn't working so well if we ask the right questions and we listen really openly. And we need to let go of the culture of scarcity and no longer drive us to say we can't do that. We've got to throw a few phrases out the window. We should probably have a party to get rid of, put them in balloons and send them off, environmentally safe balloons. And one of them is we can't do it. We don't have the money for it, or we've always done it this way and it works. We need to take off our blinders and not allow limited resources to limit our innovation and our impact. Sometimes innovation actually means scaling back. I had developed a technology education program at Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Denver, and then wound up going to the National Organization of Boys and Girls Clubs of America to run technology programs there. And one of the programs that I was in charge of when I got there was a youth chat space. And the goal was, if you remember, MySpace existed then, and that was the big thing. Facebook was coming, but was still sort of at the collegiate level. And we weren't all sharing photos of kids to grandma yet on Facebook. But MySpace was really big. And Boys and Girls Clubs of America was trying to respond with technology solutions for youth that would be engaging, keep them plugged in to the club experience, especially as they got older, and would keep them abreast of technology and also provide a safe space for them to chat and engage in social media. The problem was when I arrived, we were only serving at a national level about 35 kids a day through a very expensive, very cumbersome program that was an incredible experiment, but I quickly believed that it wasn't an experiment that was working. But it's hard to tell a team and an organization that their huge, incredible investment and really great idea might be a failure. So I kept my eye on this ball and kept assessing the program. I kept working with the team to try to figure out how to iterate, how to grow the impact of the program. But it just wasn't gaining traction. So finally, what we did was we scaled it back. How did we do that? We decided to focus on what we do best at Boys and Girls Clubs of America, which is youth development. We're never going to be the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, and we couldn't compete with them. We weren't tech geniuses, but we were youth development geniuses who could use technology as a platform to do what we did best. So we took all the backbone technology that we'd already built, all the secure mechanisms that were already in place, and we created a portal for youth, for teens, to engage with club activities, club content, and club curriculum, whether they were in the club in a new, fun, dynamic, more teen-centered way, or whether they were not at the club. And this was 16 years ago. To engage them, continue to keep them tethered to the organization, because we knew that the more context a youth has with a Boys and Girls Club, the less likely they are to experience violence after school hours or get involved in the justice system or fall back in their school. The more likely they are to graduate on time. So we needed to keep them tied to and engaged in the clubs. So we went back to what we were best at, and we leveraged technology to do that. We simplified, the budget reduced exponentially, but it became an incredible driver for program development and delivery that the organization still uses today. It became an incredible driver for youth content creation, and we created a youth reporter program across the country where kids tell about what's happening at their club and their community. And they even got to interview people like Denzel Washington and J-Lo and John Legend, all club alumni. So the program, scaling it back, actually opened up an incredible number of other opportunities that better met our mission and drove far more impact. I'm really proud of all that we accomplished as a team. But the point too is sometimes innovating means really getting focused, really prioritizing, and knowing what you can do really well and where you can drive impact, and staying laser focused on that. It's not always a bigger idea. It's not always that new invention. So in order to keep innovating, to create it as part of your organization's DNA, you've already made some shifts. So many of you were already in a world of innovation in the nonprofit sector. So let's carry that momentum forward by creating cultures, intentional cultures in each of our organizations where innovation is part of what we do. So how do we do that? You already ran towards the crisis. So now continually run towards that problem. Love the problem more than your solution. Look at your problem continually and your solutions continually and say, are we really driving the impact that we intend? Have curiosity about what you're accomplishing and what you're not accomplishing. Have candor. Be really brutally honest with yourself about what is working and what is not working. And sometimes make tough calls like I did with that program at Boys and Girls Clubs of America. It paid off. It was so uncomfortable. It paid off in spades. Comfort with failure. So that's C number 3. So many times we're afraid to try something new because it might not work. And guess what? It might not work. That program that I was brought in to lead at Boys and Girls Clubs of America was failing. It was not going to keep our funders happy, and it was not driving our any significant impact. It was a failure. We turned it into an incredible success that 16 years later is a vital tool for the organization that no one there could imagine not having available. Creative. Be creative. Every single person has a creative bone. We all approach creativity differently, but we all have it. So leverage your creativity and let that really lead solutions, ideas, new ways of doing things. Gather your inner tinker team. So Tinkerbell, if you're raising a child in the world of Disney Plus, you may know this, but Tinkerbell is actually a fairy who focuses on building and fixing things. She's a tinkerer. And you can develop your tinker team. I used to hire people in Denver when I was building a technology program for the clubs there, who I called them dabblers. They were the folks who would just kind of mess with technology. They weren't techies or certainly professional technologists, but they like to tinker with software or dabble with new technology. And they were more affordable than people with certifications in technology. Hire or find within your organization those people who are early adopters, who tend to always have the new software or things like that. And it's not just about technology. Who are the people who always just seem to have a new twist on things, or a way to do something differently, or who are just great problem solvers? A diverse team is really important. And I am not saying that because EDI is so prominent right now, but diversity of perspective and diversity of ideas truly is essential for innovation. One brain alone from one perspective is not going to help you create continual improvement and all the best new ideas you possibly can. A team too created of dreamers and doers. So this is a great alignment of the folks who are idea people and the folks who really know how to take an idea and make a plan and execute on that plan and actually bring that plan to life. That's a perfect synergy and partnership for your Tinker team. And of course, your Tinker team also should not just be relegated to your program group, but cover a wide range of functions at your organization. Even if your organization is itty bitty, putting together a bunch of different brains in one space and getting them working together on problem solving and innovation is really important. Starting with a core group of people who don't tend to say no first, who are curious and who will come up with creative ideas. I've become a firm believer in the last few years that, thanks in part to my great friend Meg Crosby, who's brilliant at asking great questions, but good questions, strong questions are really the key to leadership and to organizational success. And they are certainly the foundation of innovation. First, you have to really be willing to ask and be candid with yourself about whether or not you're creating the impact you intend, or you're creating the impact that really returns on the amount of energy, time, and money you're putting into it. Honing in and identifying where you are not really getting that return, and also asking how you can improve by also focusing on what is getting in our way. What do the folks on our team keep butting up against? What blocks us? What are our obstacles? What keeps us stuck? What inhibits progress? Asking great questions is definitely, no matter the size of your team, the most important thing you can do in order to create a culture of innovation. And then creating space. Once you've asked those hard questions, creating space to really ponder them. We have been living in a world of busyness. We have been so full of activity, and our activity and busyness actually depletes our impact. Research proves that the busier we are, the less productive we actually are. So the more activities you're trying to fit in, the more your schedule is overbooked, the less impact you can actually create. We drive ourselves to the brink of exhaustion or burnout, trying to extend the day and fit in as much as possible. The reality is, you're just putting in more energy, but not getting bang back for that energy. You're not getting a return on it. So it's vital that we create space and hold it sacred, that we carve out time that will not be eclipsed by other busyness. Time to love our problem. So I recommend spending a meeting per month, a couple of hours with this Tinker team, focused on our problem, assessing our problem, asking those tough questions about what is working, and really drilling into what is not working. And then another meeting about a week later, again, a couple of hours every month, turning that problem on its head. Thinking about, what if we looked at it from this angle? Or what happens if we think about it this way? This is your creative ideation meeting and problem solving meeting, where you spend the first meeting, the Love Your Problem, is about assessing your programs, your activities. The second meeting, turning it on its head, is about ideation. It's about creative problem solving. You also need to fuel your inner innovator. And what I mean by that is really intentionally making sure you are energizing the creative problem solver part of your brain and everyone on your team's brains by doing the activities that refresh you. And we all have those things we do where we realize, oh my gosh, I got my best idea. I get it. My best idea is in the shower. If you're me, you get your best ideas when you're running. So I actually prioritize running. And sometimes I drive my husband crazy. I will fit a run into the most challenging day. Why? Because I know that A, it de-stresses me, and B, it's when I problem solve my best. So on the most challenging day is actually when I need my run the absolute most. What is your run? And for your entire team, what is their version of the run? And how do you as an organization promote and support everyone taking their run on a daily basis, making it part of your regular routines? And we've got to ditch that fear, that culture of scarcity that blinds us from being able to take risk, that blinds us from being able to try new things. And it's vital if you're building a culture. Culture involves everyone in your organization. So you may start with a tinker team if you're big enough, or your whole organization might be your tinker team if you're small enough. But it's vital that you bring everybody along the journey of innovation, that it's not something held by just a few people on a team over here in their special meetings twice a month, that it's something fun you can create to engage the whole organization. Everyone can participate in innovation. One of my clients started an innovation award. So every staff meeting, team members can put in other team members for innovative solutions they've come up with. And then that person gets recognized as the innovator of that month, and they get a gift card. You can make it fun. That same organization was trying to do something really bland and boring, like update their job descriptions. And so their leadership team thought, how are we going to make this fun? How are we going to get everybody involved in this process. So they created silly videos, and then it became team competitions around the videos and who could do their job descriptions best and fastest and soonest. And they really innovated to make to engage everyone in a sort of laborious task, and everybody had fun and everybody joined the innovative culture of the organization through those videos. Communicate, make sure whatever is happening on that tinker team is not in a silo, that people across the organization are in the loop, that they are welcome to join the conversation, that they are brought in on anything that might impact them really early on in the process. Remove barriers. So making it okay again to fail, that we expect to iterate, we expect our programs or initiatives that we enroll to be imperfect out of the box. We expect to keep changing and growing and improving as we go. That's okay. It helps remove the barrier of fear that you're not going to get it right, so we just won't do it, or that if we test something and we take a risk, that if it doesn't work out, I'm going to be blamed, or it's going to be a big disaster for the organization. Shift the way you talk about these things and think about these things in your organization to remove those barriers. And most importantly, stay focused on the why. For your entire organization, why is innovating important? And that why is because, I skipped a slide, is because when you innovate, you can serve more. You can transform more lives, more communities. And everyone at a nonprofit shows up and works hard for less money, not because they want to work harder for less money, but because they want to serve, because they want to change lives and change communities. And if innovation is focused on making that happen, you can bring everybody along on that journey with you. The last thing to do with culture of innovation is to dive in. Just do it. I think we talk about ideas a lot in the nonprofit world. Sometimes we get too many ideas. And then, as a client once asked, oh, we have plenty of ideas, but how do we pick one and make it happen? So we have to prioritize and commit to something and just make it happen. I have focus on here because we need to continually remain focused on that problem, on our mission. We don't just need to chase ideas that are fun and exciting. We need to focus on those ideas that will drive our mission forward and maximize our impact. After we have a whole bevy of ideas, we've got to prioritize them and commit to one. Actually execute on it, make it happen, test it, then assess it, then iterate. We know when we put it out to try it, it will not be perfect. We're going to assess it to see what's working and what's not, and we're going to iterate and repeat, assess, and iterate until it is driving the real impact that we aspire to achieve. So why innovate? We innovate to serve more with greater impact. And I think that's a message we can all get behind. You've already done it. You've done it this whole last 12 months. And now it's a matter of celebrating what you've accomplished, harnessing it, and incorporating it into the way you operate as an organization on a routine basis. Because we all want to serve more and we all want to have greater impact. If you have any questions about this, please reach out to me. You can reach me on LinkedIn. You can email me or call me anytime. You can find me also just at joyofleading.com. I would love to chat with you about innovation or how you maximize your impact. Reach out and let's chat.
We do have time for questions. So if you have questions, put them in the chat box, put them in the Q&A. I'll monitor those. a couple of thoughts just on my end. You know, what's really interesting is following our event with Sarah Frasco, which for anyone who didn't attend that, she's an innovator as well, more on the corporate side, the entrepreneurial side. But there were a lot of really good, I think, synergies between this and what she talked about. One of which is when you were talking about turning an idea on its head, she called it the judo flip.
Yeah.
And it was basically the idea of, well, if people are not coming to us in terms of being online or doing what we do, and we're not able to do that, how can we flip it on its head and go to them? And so it's this idea of constantly looking at, okay, how do I reinvent? How do I continually, drive this idea of creativity? I love on your end the idea of a tinker team. I think for nonprofits, something that I think is actually probably the next trend, if you will. I mean, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, but is the idea of putting together committees, like tinker team committees of individuals, and maybe they're board members, maybe they're not, pulling them together to look at new ways of doing things. And I think, to your point, finding a cross-reference team of experts who are, different skill sets, different creativity, all of those things, and bringing those together to come up with new solutions that are either board members or not, but like an advisory committee. I think that's going to be a big thing that becomes a trend for nonprofits, especially. And then the last thing I'll mention is I love your innovative award to continually promote that culture. So how do you incentivize your team? And so by coming up with an innovative award or something along those lines, those are things that nonprofits can do, whether they're board members, team members, even the individuals they serve, to your point, prompt feedback, to get feedback from them. I think all of that is a really cool opportunity to create that culture of innovation. We're starting to get some questions, and also too in the chat. Here's one from Sharonda. She says, how do you encourage upper level leaders of an organization to have an innovation mindset? So how do you, we'll kind of put this in both ways. How do you create it top down?
Yeah.
And then maybe what's a tip also too for bottom up?
So awesome question. I think first of all, the top has to be in the right mindset. So the executive director or leadership team does need to be open and enthused about the idea of innovation for it to really take off. It may be sparked from somewhere middle or lower in the organization, some innovative, creative thinker or just person who's been coming up against the same problem over and over and is tired with it and wants a solution. So it may get sparked from somewhere else in the organization. But if the leadership team and the leaders aren't open to innovation and going to support it, then it won't take off. So how do you do that? I think the biggest, most important thing is to focus on that why, that you all get up every day to work so hard to serve and transform communities and lives through impact. Focusing on that as the thing that glues us all together and drives us all to be here and to serve this organization. And then peeling back from that why to, okay, so how do we ensure that all of the time and energy we put into this organization really accomplishes what we set out to do? None of us show up to work at a nonprofit, devote our entire lives to it, to just make little bits of change. No, we all join nonprofits to change the world. So I think when we can really energize our team around the fact that trying new things, taking some risks, being creative and doing things differently, that will allow us to achieve what we all in our hearts got into this sector to do to begin with. I think that's sort of the starting place to fuel a new culture of innovation or to build on the momentum you've already created.
I think a couple of things that I've seen too is, one, leaders love results. If they're getting results, then you can win the day. And so in many cases, like you said, starting small. So if this is something that you obviously think is really going to work, maybe it's a team, maybe it's you as an individual, beta testing, showing some results,
Yeah.
and then bringing it and saying, hey, look, here's what's working. Here's what I've seen. Can we expand this out? Can we make this a little bigger of an opportunity? And I think anytime you can drive results, you have much more of a voice to activate. And one of the examples that I give in terms of, I think, and it goes back to culture, but it also goes back to initiative, is this is many years ago, but we were talking about on our end, developing a new website. And Allison Carson on our team, without me even knowing, like taught herself how to code, like, because she saw a need, she saw a problem, and she just started on her own to create a solution. And she came back, and this is like, months later, and she's like, we had a brief conversation. She comes back months later and she's like, hey, I want you to check out the new website that I've been working on. And I think we're pretty close to being ready. And I'm like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, I taught myself how to code. I taught myself all these things. But she had already done all the research, tested it out, came to me with the results. And she's like, boom, let's do this. And it's like, yes. And that was a game changer for us. But it goes back to, one, empowering your team, two, giving them the ownership that they can come back with a plan and results, and then saying, okay, let's do this. But I think all of that goes back to innovation. And to your point, innovation isn't just technology, it's the process of continually trying to iterate and improve.
Right.
So go ahead, everybody, keep putting in the chat box the Q&A in terms of questions. But what's another example that you've seen throughout the pandemic? And you listed quite a few, but what's another example that you think is something that stood out to you as a really neat innovation that got your attention from the nonprofit side? So what's another story that you think is a good
example? Well, there have been so many. And before I forget to, I do want to say, you mentioned Sarah Fresca's presentation, which I highly recommend everyone watching. It was brilliant. It was fun. It was a great presentation. And I thought, I have to go after that. But brilliant. She has these 5 sort of mindset concepts for innovation that are great. You're going to love it. So definitely watch that. She energized me for sure. But also, you were asking about more ideas. There have been so many. It's incredible. Certainly, obviously, everybody's gone virtual with events. My kids' school PTO did a family night with a magician. It was one of the most fun nights my family has had together, with just a virtual magician event. It was so great. But one of the fun or really amazing innovations that I saw, an organization in the height of this crisis last fall needed to run a capital campaign. They already had paper signed to buy a building, and that it was pre-COVID, this whole plan, and they needed to get the funds to make it happen. And if they didn't make this happen, they were not going to be able to keep their organization growing the way they intended and the way that they really needed to. So they ran a capital campaign last fall, and they knew they had to do something different. So they decided, instead of multiple years long campaign, we're doing 60 days. We're doing a 60-day campaign. We're going to ask key leaders to just give us 60 days of their time and effort and focus. They also were able to invest in some really cool development materials, things I have never seen before, but basically they created a video brochure that is physical, but you could tap on it and see video of their program in action and the results, testimonials of the impact of that program. And so they were able to, they were worried first the investment in those was so significant. Each of those brochures was ridiculously expensive. But when you look at how much money they raised in 60 days, the investment in those materials was nothing. It was an upfront cost that paid exponentially in dividends.
What's interesting when you talk about, just looking at things differently. When you talk about that, I was thinking just graduations, like high school graduations. And traditionally, being in person, obviously, but when a lot of the high schools had to pivot and colleges too, I actually loved what they did because they said, how can we tell a story? So then they started, telling the story of each student. So instead of them just walking across the stage, now you're actually like seeing pictures of them growing up and hearing from their families and getting to know them a little bit and where they're going. It's like, to me, that was so cool because now you actually got to know each student. Now it was more work,
Yeah.
but it was, once again, how can we connect? How can we do things in a different way and still be able to fulfill this mission, right? And so I think that is something that every nonprofit can take from that playbook is, how can we tell the story? How can we leverage Zoom and get our funders and our fighters together and tell those stories? I just think there is a powerful way now to look at this intersection of rapid growth in technology, forced innovation in terms of what we're dealing with, and yet this idea of creative energy that we all have, bring those together to do things differently, but ultimately connect in very new ways and throw away the head trash, like you said, of the scarcity and that mentality.
Let's focus right, and on the things that really work and move the needle. And this past year, as we were forced to do that, nonprofits who notoriously, I believe, have been terrible about telling their stories and marketing suddenly got so much better at it because you had to, and you had to stand out in a sea of nonprofits trying to tell their stories, garner resources to stay afloat or to serve an increasing demand. I think virtual events too, to your point, folks had to figure out, they had to figure out how to tell the story. And what I'm loving about virtual events, first of all, I was never a fan. I hated planning events when I worked in the nonprofit world. I also have never been a fan of attending them. I love people, but not necessarily 1,000 at a time. And I felt like usually no matter what we did, you couldn't quite resonate with each person the way that you needed to in telling the story. Usually because a board member needed to tell the story or something. But with virtual events, I feel like people had to get really focused on what's most important out of this event because it's not going to be the food and the flowers. So how do we really capture people's attention? How do we really educate them? And how do we share our impact in a way that drives them to support us? And so I feel like virtual events are far more impactful from an engagement standpoint and an educational and marketing standpoint than live events.
Well, that is going to be the topic of an upcoming session for sure, because when you look at the future of where we're headed for nonprofits, as things start to come back in person, you're going to have to do a hybrid event because that's going to be the new norm. And especially even on our end is meeting people where they are physically, but mentally. And there are going to be many people who don't feel comfortable coming out to especially larger events. And that's going to have a tailwind that's a long time. And so I think it's going to force the hand for innovation on events of how do we put together an in-person experience that's safe, and then also an online experience that's robust to be able to engage those who don't feel comfortable coming out. And now the global audience that's been created to meet people where they are who physically, just geographically, aren't in your area. So I think that's going to force the hand of innovation in a whole new way. And so that will be a session coming up that we'll talk about for sure. So a little bit of a teaser on that, but let's go ahead and wrap up. And thank you again, Katie Spencer, founder of Joy of Leading. Let's give her a virtual and on my end, legitimate round of applause there.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being a part of our Get On Board series. Thank you to Katie, the Assisi Foundation, and all of you